Sometimes life's journeys bring you to an intersection of people who so greatly influence your future that it seems like a dream. Dr. Jamie Marich not only found her awakening in our native country of Croatia, but was mentored by a unique humanitarian soul who also had a huge effect on my life. She found herself going down an alcoholic path, unaware of her addiction, which led her to connecting the dots of resiliency in her own life. This important shift changed her purpose to helping others through her work in clinical counseling. I'm Tai Chi. At 19, I was a superstar and I was lost inside. I left it all behind, switched continents, and started all over. Years later, I found myself lost again, this time in the American dream. This is a story about awakening, about living the life you were created for, about going inward and discovering the joyous and purposeful person you and I are both meant to be. This is Waking Up in America. Dobro mi došel, prijatelj, v ovaj prekrasni dom. Hi, Jamie.
Oh, hvala, meni je drago. So lovely to be here with you, and you're going to make me cry already.
So tell our viewers, I don't think they understood.
It was a beautiful song of welcome.
Yes.
Beautiful song of welcome. And I received that welcome with a whole heart.
Thank you. So we talked about the dots, connecting the dots. Mm-hmm. And here are our dots. We grew up, we come from the same country.
Well, I was born here, just to clarify. You had the more intense experience, but it was a very big part of my culture and my upbringing.
Yes, and then you were connected to my music.
Yes.
When you were very little.
Yes.
We have the same mentor, Father Svet.
Mm-hmm. He was one of my big ones in my path, yes.
Yes. Then, earlier this year, we were connecting through a friend who insisted I watch your TEDx talk. And when I did, I became an instant fan of you and your work. And now, connect your dots for me.
Oh. It's all about connection, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I think about, you mentioned Father Svet, Father Svetozar Kraljevic, who was one of the parish priests serving at Medjugorje when I served there. It's a small village, for the viewers who don't know, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the Croatian part of the country. And as we mentioned, that's where my ancestry and just has been a big part of my life growing up. And I went there after college because, as you mentioned, I was on a very alcoholic path, a very destructive path at the time. Didn't know where I was going in life. And through my travels, through my journeys, I went there simply because my grandmother had always told me about it. That was my motivation as a backpacker. And I ended up meeting a beautiful group of people. Father Svet was one of them, but he was really the figure that welcomed me to stay for an extended period and work teaching English and helping with some English language assisting. And I met Janet, who was a social worker, an American social worker that had come back and forth during the war, and she was spending an extended service period in Medjugorje as well. And she was the one who really put me on my path of recovery. And all of the children and the adults I had a chance to work with over there were all teachers,
yes.
In a way. And then from that experience there, 2.5 years, Father Svet and Janet essentially both said it's time to go home and go back to school. And they sent me to work or to school to study to be a clinical counselor. And part of my resistance was, I don't even like psychology. What's this about? And I remember both of them said, trust us, I think you'll like it. I think this is a good fit.
You're a clinical counselor.
Clinical counselor is my official title, yes.
Yes, and you're also an author of several books, and your newest book is coming out, and we'll talk about that later.
Sure.
You're also a musician. You started out, right, as a creative artist?
Yes. From the age of 3, I was playing violin. From the age of 4, I was in a tamborashi group in my native Youngstown, Ohio. And so folk dancing and singing was a big part of my childhood, doing dancing and skating throughout the years. And yes, art has been my origin.
You mentioned Father Svet, and you worked there as an interpreter, helping. Were you helping at the Marich Mother's Village?
Yes, Marich Mother's Village. Really the first job I had there was as an English language tutor, because a lot of the children were studying in school, and Father put me to work.
And just for our viewers,
Sure.
let's explain, this is an orphanage that Father Svet put together, and right next to it is a community for a drug rehab.
Right.
And there's this amazing intersection of these orphans, you know, people who here they're, you know, the guys in rehab who are orphaned by just being lost in the world, and this is how he explained to me. And right next to them is these kids from all kinds of backgrounds.
Oh, right. Because I even learned when I was there, orphanage, you know, it's not orphan in a true sense necessarily of having both parents lost, but just a lot of displacement. And that's interesting because although I never had any direct work with the rehab that was there on site, it was talking about dots connecting. Just thinking about how so many of those kids I had the privilege of working with taught me so many valuable lessons. I referenced one in the TEDx talk. Just about resilience and overcoming fear. And that's why I consider a lot of those children my spiritual teachers. I'm delighted to be connected still with many of them on Facebook. The modern era has allowed for that. And they're my teachers.
Wonderful.
They really
And when we come back, we'll talk about more in detail about those teachers that shifted Jamie into her life that she's living now. This episode was made possible by Film Your Why, helping entrepreneurs like you create videos that convey the story behind your business and engage loyal customers. Find out more at filmyourwhy.com. Jamie, you went to Bosnia and Croatia to interpret language, and you came back interpreting life in a completely different way.
I think all interpreting's about learning, really. Because I don't know. I went there to learn. And it's such a fascinating metaphor you just presented. I never even thought of it that way.
Isn't it great?
Overwhelmed.
But you know, there's another thing. You said you were a backpacker, and you were there, right? Your initial reason was because your grandmother wanted you to travel. And isn't it that all who wander are not lost?
Oh, I believe that.
And all who, we should give a credit to Tolkien, right,
Sure.
for that quote. And another thing is that all who travel are seekers, pilgrims. You know, why do we go on pilgrimages but to seek and look? And what did you find there?
It almost sounds cliche to say I found myself, but it really is what happened. And I know for me, travel is a medium that brings that out. And to me, the fascinating thing about my travels through Eastern Europe was I didn't go with any direct spiritual intent. It was, you know, to party, to see where I'm from and learn about different cultures, because as a student, I was a student of history at the time. So that was a lot of what fascinated me. But it was the connections that we talked about earlier, meeting people, that became a big part of the spiritual pilgrimage. And it's interesting because I visited not just Medjugorje, but a lot of other places in Eastern Europe, all these great holy sites, and they're wonderful, and I'm not putting them down as holy sites, but it was the connections that were made.
Absolutely, the relationships
and
people.
Sure, with relationships and people and others, that was truly transformative.
You are now in Marich in Mother's Village, and that you so beautifully deliver that story in your TEDx talk about the little girl that taught you about
overcoming fear.
Yes.
Overcoming fear.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I remember her name was Anita. And the essence of the story was I was teaching her how to ride a swing or to play on the swing because she saw all of the other children doing it and she was too afraid to give it a try. And I remember, you know, it was one of the biggest lessons I learned about healing, presence, just being there for her and supporting her because her goal was to ride this swing because it looked like so much fun. And how I was able to get her to start it was by first sitting on my lap as we went on the swing together. And it was fun, it was great. And then eventually we worked into it, to giving it a try on her own. And so she gave it a try on her own, and a little more each day she went higher and higher. And I will never forget, the transformative part of that whole story was when she fell, because in pushing her limits and experimenting and exploring the fun of it, she fell. She was trying to jump off of it like she saw the older kids do. And then she cried and cried and cried miserably. And my first instinct was, she's never going to want to do this again. And I got a little terrified, but it was being there for her, giving her that support, validating that, yes, this stinks that this happened. And before long, she was up on the swing, trying it again, this time going higher and higher, and then just declaring, I'm not afraid anymore. And that was a big shift for me, learning about the power of overcoming fear, because so much of my own personal paralysis, spiritually, mentally, physically, has been about fear, really, at various points in my journey.
Is that why you found yourself in addictive behavior?
Oh, sure. I mean, fear of feeling my emotions, fear of the unknown, fear of being judged. I mean, just, you could name a whole laundry list of fears, and not feeling like I had any real coping to deal with the fear. And that was a big part of what started it.
How did that moment help you to tap into those fears and release them?
With that story specifically, I'm not exactly pinpointing the chronology of when in my journey over there that happened, but I believe it was actually after I had put down the drink officially. And Janet, who was the figure Father Svet introduced me to, she was a big part in that journey. But for the first 9 months or so that I was learning to live without alcohol, it became matters of, how do I address fear? How do I address feeling heavy emotion? And I remember one of the dots that connected seeing and hearing Anita having that experience was, it really is about faith. My own work with Janet at that time is that the greatest recipe, if you will, for dealing with fear is to have a strong faith. And for me, that's taken on various shapes over the years, but I know that the more and more I'm challenged to work with my faith, with my spiritual practice, it's helped me deal with that fear as fear comes, because it doesn't go away.
Right. Yes.
It doesn't go away, but it's, what are you going to do with it when life brings it to you? Which
is important, because when the fear comes and we fall off of that swing, are we going to go back on or stay away? But there is an important part, I think, there is that, Anita had you right there, and you allowed her to cry and feel the sadness and everything, hurt and feeling of failure, right? And then you were there as her support to come back. And I think so many times in our lives, when fear comes, we're not allowed to cry.
Right.
B, we're not allowed to say, I'm scared, right? So you now provide a lot of that counselor for others. But what about you? What's your fallback on that fear?
I still go back to that story as having so many of the deep lessons I need even today when fears come. Seek support. I have such an amazing support network of friends, of mentors, of teachers who I can lean on. They let me cry. That's very important. That's very important. And another part of that story I still go to today as a lesson is, when I fall, am I going to stay down or am I going to get up on the swing? And it's hard. I'm the first to admit it's hard to get back on the swing. So Anita is one I've never been able to find on Facebook or get in contact with. So if she should happen to be watching somewhere in Croatia or the US,
yes,
I thank her.
Or anywhere in the world.
Or anywhere in the world. So many of those lessons still stick with me today from that story.
When we come back, we'll talk to Dr. Jamie Marich about what to do when you fall off the swing, and her work in Dancing Mindfulness. This episode was made possible by Film Your Why, helping entrepreneurs like you create videos that convey the story behind your business and engage loyal customers. Find out more at filmyourwhy.com. We're talking to Dr. Jamie Marich, clinical counselor, author, expert in trauma. Could I say that? Yeah.
That's what a lot of people call me. So, but they say an expert is somebody who's made every mistake in the book and has learned from it.
Yes.
So on that account, I'm an expert.
That's wonderful. We talked about little Anita, a little girl that you encountered who fell off the swing and taught all of us on this show a beautiful lesson. There is a trauma involved there.
Part of my teaching is that trauma, the English word trauma comes from the Greek word meaning wound. And I think, I hate to always say it's as simple as that, because there's nothing simple about trauma, but we sometimes try to overcomplicate it by talking about clinical PTSD and clinical diagnoses and all these things that happen with the brain. And that knowledge is great and wonderful. But as humanitarians, as people who work with others, it really is about understanding that trauma is any unhealed wound. And if the wound remains unhealed, it can fester and continue to cause problems in our lives. And that's a lot of how I teach about trauma in the various ways that I teach.
When I watched your TEDx talk, and you mentioned that's how you opened the talk, a few years ago, my kids asked me, why do people go to psychiatrists and therapists? And I explained, when your arm is broken, you go to see a healer, a doctor, and they put your arm together. When your heart is broken, you have to go see someone. But so many people, unless it's a big trauma, we don't heal these wounds. So talk to me a little bit on that. You know, and I don't want to say everyday trauma, I don't want to undermine that word, but a broken heart.
Sure, wounding. That's why I like that word wounding so much, because I think we have an understanding that all wounds can cause an issue. Even if it is a simple scrape, it needs some time and attention in order to heal. Yet emotionally, think of how often we neglect that. And I love how you shared it with your kids, that it really is any kind of injury or wound. That's, the heart is hurt, the soul is hurt, and that deserves care. Something else I mentioned in the talk, and I really believe this, is that we can be here to care for each other as well. Not every wound necessarily needs to be taken to a professional, although many do. I want to be clear about that. But the connections that we make as people, whether it be in faith communities, self-help or 12-step type of communities, just as an example, meditation communities, there's so many great examples I've seen of where people can be there to support each other. And what do we get there? Often healing, validation, support that can help those wounds heal so they don't fester long term.
Yes, to me it's on everyday level, people, even strangers. One of my biggest challenges in America as a different culture from Croatia is that here I hear, but there was a lot in Croatia about that too, don't cry.
Oh yeah.
Don't cry.
Nemoj plakati.
Nemoj. I often say, just please cry.
Yes.
Here, offer your shoulder and have someone cry. Be there for someone that wants to cry, and cry yourself.
We're on the same wavelength there, definitely.
What is your biggest joy in the work that you do?
Wow, the one biggest. I don't know. Dancing, singing, and whether it's not, it doesn't have to be actual dancing or singing, but seeing somebody's soul start to sing, seeing somebody's soul start to dance. I can see that both when I teach and when I work with people. I can see that in my family and friends connections often. And I just love seeing people come to life. I think that is something that would resonate with you. But I find that in order for that to happen, a lot of tears often need to be shed to take you there.
Yes.
And I think that's beautiful.
Yes. Tears really just unlock a lot of the
And even as you're doing that, it's like it's a
Yes,
river. It
it's a
takes
river.
us to that journey and where we need to go for healing.
So tell me about the motion. It's my dancing.
Beautiful. That's what it's about.
Yes.
Responding to the needs of the body. It's a big thing I teach in Dancing Mindfulness.
Tell us about that.
Dancing Mindfulness has just been a long progress of combining a lot of my passions and loves, trauma work, using expressive arts for healing, meditation, community gathering. And it's a practice that I started teaching probably about 2011, 2012 is when I was really developing it. And I'm trying to think about how to make this concise as possible, because to me, Dancing Mindfulness, it's something we all do inherently, because mindfulness is this art of being in the moment without judgment. And I often say the first time I practiced dancing mindfulness was when I was doing those colos, was when I was in my parents' basement as a 5-year-old putting on Mickey Mouse records and just responding to the needs of the body. That it's nothing to do with choreographed steps or having to look a certain way. It's just moving the body with this sense of joy and freedom. And challenging people now to see that as a legitimate form of meditation, that this is a way to connect and center and pray. In one way, the work isn't radically original because people have been doing this since the dawn of time. One thing I've been trying to do with it is create safe community spaces for it that are trauma informed. So you're not going to be judged for how you move. We try to make the classes as safe as possible. And now with the book, it's really inspiring people to develop a personal meditation practice that uses dance.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Because mindfulness too, there's also be mindful of your thoughts. We are talking so much, thankfully, more and more about mindfulness in your everyday life. So it's taking your awareness away from the judgment, away from the external, right? And being mindful of what does your body want to express, is that?
Very much so.
Okay.
Being mindful of what your body wants to express, using it as a vehicle for your present moment experience. And here's where I see it as slightly different than some of the other dance forms that are out there. It's not about using dance to escape. It's about using dance to become more present and embodied and hospitable to your experience in the moment, whatever that may be.
Wow, and we're going to show a little segment to visually show our viewers what it looks like. And how can they find you? How can they do it when the book comes out?
Sure, the easiest website home is just, if you remember the phrase Dancing Mindfulness, dancingmindfulness.com is the website. If you're on Facebook or social media, Dancing Mindfulness is the Facebook page. It's Dancing Mindful on Twitter. And either, or any, I should say, of those platforms will connect you with classes, with facilitator trainings we do, information about the book, and then video that we also did. So there's something in it where you can connect with us if you're feeling called.
We're going to watch the segment and give you a little bit of taste of Dr. Jamie Marich's Dancing Mindfulness, coming to you from Creative Lounge at the O Gallery in Nashville, Tennessee.
If you were here for the end of my set, I gave you a little bit of a background on my shtick with all of this, which is basically we're going to have a free dance. We're going to start with just a little bit of music that incites some invitation to move.
Visit us at wakingupinamerica.net to find links to Jamie's work, connect with her, and check out other episodes with more amazing guests we feature here. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.